In the early 2000s, a woman in her late 20s moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood after a difficult breakup. The area felt safe. Tree-lined streets, families, joggers in the morning. Nothing about the place felt threatening. For the first few weeks, everything was normal. Then small things started happening. Her trash can would be moved from where she left it. Not knocked over, just repositioned. She assumed a neighbor had moved it while parking. A package once arrived already opened, but nothing was missing. She blamed delivery damage. At night, she sometimes felt like she was being watched through the window. Not in a dramatic way, just a vague discomfort. She would close the blinds and forget about it. A month later, she found muddy footprints behind her house. They led from the tree line to the back fence, then stopped. There were no prints leaving. She told herself it was probably kids cutting through the yard. The first real red flag came when her dog started acting strange. The dog refused to go outside at night. It would stop at the door and growl softly into the darkness, ears pinned back. During the day, it behaved normally. Then the woman noticed something else. Her back gate, and which she always locked, would sometimes be unlocked in the morning. She checked the latch. It wasn't broken. No damage. No signs of forced entry, just unlocked. She changed the lock. 2 nights later, it was unlocked again. At this point, fear set in. She installed motion lights in the backyard. The next morning, she found one of the lights turned away from the yard, angled toward the fence instead. Someone had adjusted it by hand. She called the police. They walked the property, took notes, and suggested installing cameras. No signs of a break-in, no witnesses, no reports in the area. That night, she barely slept. Around 3:40 a.m., she heard footsteps on gravel outside her bedroom window. Slow, careful, too deliberate to be an animal. She held her breath. The steps stopped directly beneath the window. Then came a soft tapping on the glass. 3 taps. Gentle, almost polite. She didn't move. She didn't scream. She stayed frozen until sunrise. When she finally looked outside, there were footprints beneath the window. Clear impressions pressed into damp soil. They faced the glass. Someone had been standing there, watching. And whoever it was knew exactly where her bedroom was. After the night of the tapping, the woman didn't sleep in her bedroom again for nearly a week. She moved a mattress into the living room and kept every light on. During the day, she tried to act normal. Went to work, ran errands, smiled at neighbors. But everything felt different now. The house no longer felt empty. It felt occupied. She took a day off and installed cameras herself. One facing the backyard, one covering the side of the house, and one inside pointed at the back door. The police had recommended it, but now it felt urgent. The first 2 nights showed nothing. No motion alerts, no activity. She almost convinced herself the tapping had been a stress hallucination. On the 3rd night, the backyard camera triggered at 2:17 a.m. The footage showed a figure standing just beyond the reach of the motion light, partially hidden by the fence line. He didn't move for almost a full minute. Just stood there, facing the house. The camera's resolution wasn't good enough to see his face clearly, but she could tell he was wearing dark clothing and a hood. Then, slowly, he stepped backward into the trees. The next morning, she reviewed the footage again and noticed something worse. The man hadn't arrived suddenly. He had already been there before the camera activated, standing completely still until he shifted his weight. That meant he knew exactly where the cameras were. Over the next week, more footage came in. Always late at night. Always brief. The man never approached the house directly. He stayed just far enough away to avoid the lights. Sometimes he appeared on the side camera, sometimes near the back fence. And always he came from the same direction. The tree line behind her property backed up to a narrow strip of undeveloped land, woods separating the neighborhood from an older, partially abandoned industrial area. There was no official path through it, but the camera footage showed signs of a worn trail. She called the police again. This time, they took it seriously. An officer pointed out something she hadn't noticed. The man wasn't wandering, he was circling, testing visibility, mapping blind spots. This wasn't someone passing through. "This looks like surveillance," the officer said. That night, the cameras went offline for exactly 11 minutes. And when they came back on, the backyard camera had been tilted slightly upward, no longer aimed at ground level. The indoor camera showed the back door still locked. No alarms triggered. Someone had entered the yard without being seen and disabled the camera by hand. The police increased patrols. A cruiser passed her house twice a night. For 3 nights, nothing happened. On the 4th night, her dog started growling again, low and continuous. Not barking, warning. She checked the live feed on her phone. The man was standing closer than ever before. He was inside the yard now, just feet from the back door. And this time he was holding something long and narrow in his right hand. She locked herself in the bathroom and called 911. While she whispered into the phone, she heard the sound of fingers brushing against the back door handle. Not turning it, just touching it, as if to remind her he was there. When police arrived minutes later, the yard was empty. No footprints this time, no signs of entry. But on the back door, just below the handle, there was a fresh smear. Skin oil, not dirt, a handprint. Whoever this was wasn't just watching anymore. He was getting closer. The police searched the property again in daylight, this time with a different mindset. They weren't looking for signs of forced entry anymore, they were looking for familiarity. One of the officers noticed something odd almost immediately. The grass along the fence line was flattened in a narrow strip, not fresh, but worn down over time. Not from animals, from repeated footsteps. Someone had been standing there often, waiting. Behind the shed, partially hidden by ivy, they found something else. A loose section of wooden fencing that could be lifted quietly without breaking. No damage, no noise. It was intentional. But the most disturbing discovery came from inside the house. The officer asked if she'd checked the attic since moving in. She hadn't. The access hatch was in the hallway ceiling. When they pulled it down, dust fell, but not as much as expected. The ladder creaked under the officer's weight as he climbed up. Then he froze. The attic insulation had been compressed in several areas, forming narrow paths. Someone had been crawling up there. Recently, they found cigarette ash near a roof beam. Not old, still gray, not fully settled. There was no smell of smoke in the house because the attic vents led directly outside. Someone had been inside her home without her knowing. The police searched deeper. Near the far corner of the attic, they found a flattened cardboard sheet laid across the beams, just wide enough for a person to lie on. Beside it were 3 items: an empty water bottle, a protein bar wrapper, and a small notebook. The notebook contained dates, not many words, just dates and times. Every entry corresponded to moments she could remember clearly. Nights she'd come home late, mornings she'd overslept, weekends when she had guests over. One line stood out. "Lights off early, crying." That entry was dated 2 weeks before the tapping began. She had never told anyone about that night. The police immediately classified the situation as a long-term stalking case. This wasn't escalation, this was exposure. Whatever barrier had existed between them had disappeared. They evacuated her from the house that afternoon. While packing essentials, she realized something else was wrong. Her spare phone charger, the one she kept in the kitchen drawer, was gone. She hadn't used it in months. She hadn't noticed it missing. That night, while she stayed with a friend, the police staked out the house. At 1:48 a.m., motion sensors triggered inside the attic. The man didn't try to hide this time. He moved slowly, deliberately toward the hatch. When officers entered the house, they heard footsteps above them. Fast now, panicked. They reached the attic just in time to see the insulation shifting toward the far end, toward a vent large enough for a person to squeeze through. He escaped into the trees before they could stop him, but he left something behind. In the attic, wedged between beams, they found a phone. Powered off, old model, no SIM card. Inside were hundreds of photos. Photos of the house from the outside. Photos of her through windows. Photos taken from inside the attic, looking down through small cracks in the ceiling. And one final image. A photo of her sleeping, taken from inside the room. The timestamp was from 3 months earlier. Whoever this was hadn't just been watching her life. He had been living alongside it. The phone found in the attic became the center of the investigation. Forensic teams spent days extracting what little data remained on it. There were no contacts, no messages, no identifiable apps beyond the camera. Whoever owned it had used it for one purpose only: watching. The photos told a story the police hadn't fully understood yet. Many of the images were taken months before she moved in. The house, empty. The listing sign still in the yard. Contractors coming and going. One photo showed her on the day she'd first visited the property, keys in hand, smiling at the front door. He had been there before she ever arrived. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood again, this time with photos printed out. Several neighbors recognized the man immediately, or thought they did. A tall figure, hood up, often seen walking late at night, sometimes standing near the woods behind the properties. No one had questioned it because he never caused trouble. He waved, he blended in. One elderly neighbor remembered something else. During renovations, a man had approached her asking if the house would be rented or sold. He claimed to be helping the previous owner clear things out. That name, when checked, didn't exist in any property records. The previous owner had died alone. That detail changed everything. Police discovered that the attic access hatch had been modified years earlier. Hinges replaced, insulation rearranged. The crawl paths weren't new. They were maintained. Carefully. This wasn't a break-in. It was an inheritance. The theory emerged quietly among investigators. The man had been living in the house before, possibly for years, undetected. When the owner died and the property went on the market, he never left. He simply adapted. She wasn't chosen at random. She replaced someone. The notebook entries stopped abruptly the night the tapping began. That was the first time she had acknowledged his presence, even unknowingly. Sound travels upward. He would have heard her moving, pausing, listening. The tapping wasn't communication, it was testing. After the escape, police expanded the search radius, checking abandoned structures, forest paths, drainage tunnels. They found signs of temporary camps, discarded food, plastic sheets, burned out fires, but nothing definitive. Then, 3 weeks later, another house 2 towns over reported something familiar. Soft tapping, attic noises, a missing charger. That family had moved in less than a month earlier. Police arrived within hours this time. They searched immediately. The attic was empty, but the insulation had already been moved. On the wall, written in pencil, barely visible unless you were looking for it, was a single sentence. "You should have been quieter." No fingerprints were recovered, no arrests were made. The original house remains vacant to this day. Prospective buyers walk away quickly, unsettled by a feeling they can't explain. Locals avoid the street at night. Some swear they still see movement near the roofline. The woman never returned to collect the rest of her belongings. She left the town entirely, changed her name, refused interviews. Years later, a detective involved in the case admitted something off the record. They don't believe the man ever left the area. They believe he's still there, waiting for another house, another owner, another silence to listen to.